Hello everyone and welcome back to Beatles channel. Lovely to have you here. Thanks for joining me for this video. Hope you're all doing well. Before we get started, I'd like to wish all my American viewers a happy Thanksgiving Day. I hope you're enjoying the holiday, and what could be more appropriate for a topic for Thanksgiving Day to review the 6 albums that are included inside the new Beatles 1964 US albums in mono box set. Now, if you saw my unboxing video, you'll know that I didn't buy the box set. The reason why I didn't buy the box set is because I already had a copy of the Beatles story, and I don't need another copy that I'll never play. So I bought the 6 albums individually because I did want those, and the reason why I wanted them is because I've never owned them. I've never even heard them. And when these were, announced, when this box set was announced, a lot of people on my channel said that these would only be of interest to American fans, people that had these albums way back when, grew up with these albums, have that emotional attachment to these albums, have that nostalgic feeling about how they felt when they first heard these albums in their bedrooms or wherever. And that is true. That maybe that they want to get a brand new spanking brand new copy of an album that they love, that's pretty battered by now. Maybe that was the case, but obviously not the case for me. I didn't grow up with these albums. As I say, I've never heard them. I only own a couple of American albums. The Beatles story that you just saw. I've got the American Beatles Rarities album, obviously Magical Mystery Tour, and I also got Hey Jude, which is another one that I had very, very early on, from when I became a fan. But these albums, as they are, I've never heard them, never thought I needed them, because I didn't know too much about them back then. I thought, if I've got the songs, then I don't need them sequenced in a different order. But I now feel that I do. So I'm going to be reviewing these albums, how they sound, what I think of them as a Brit, hearing these for the first time. I'm not sure if there's any other Brits that have done a review of these albums yet. I'm sure there will be some along soon, but I'm going to do mine today. I've played these albums twice through, each of them. And before we sort of get started into it, let me just say, let's just talk about the presentation of these, because I'm not gonna get everything out of the records, because I have already done an unboxing. If you've been living under a stone for the last few days and not seen an unboxing of these records, and you still want to see one, there will be an end card at the end of this video, and you can watch mine if you want. But I have to say, the presentation of these albums is absolutely phenomenal, top class. All of them look really, really, really good. Nice thick cardboard covers, strong. I think these originally had a sort of the picture was like pasted onto the cardboard before, not anymore. It's a kind of a wraparound now, and I think it was with later issues of these as well. Not fold backs like the UK version, but these are very nice. They're very glossy, inside the record, every record is in a polyline sleeve. You also get an original inner sleeve that was issued with these Capitol albums back in the day. There's also a 4-page booklet written by Bruce Spicer, giving you information about the album. And so these records were pressed in France, and I have to say, they are absolutely superb. It's been a long time since I've heard some new records that have sounded as quiet as this. I'm not talking about the volume of the music. I'm talking about, when you put the stylus on the record, there's no crackles and pops in the dead wax. The bits in between tracks, absolutely silent. I've not heard such a bunch of quiet albums for quite some time, and it shouldn't even be a thing that we're discussing, complimenting on the fact that that these albums are perfect, but so often they're not. You do get those cracks and pops, and they are annoying. They shouldn't be. As long as they don't bleed into the music, then it shouldn't really bother us. But it does. It does, because when you take a brand new album out of the shrink, you expect it to be perfect, and quite often it's not. But all 6 of these are absolutely perfect. Even taking the records out of the polyline sleeve, they were absolutely spotless. Every single one of them, no bits of paper on the records or, dust or hairs or anything on them. Absolutely spotless. So the presentation has been absolutely fantastic. So what I'm going to be doing in this video is telling you, as a Brit, what I think of these American albums. So these albums are very different from their UK counterparts, and we have to kind of treat them as a kind of a separate entity, and they're different for lots of reasons. For a start, fewer tracks. American albums, the standard in the 60s, 12 or 11 tracks per album. In the UK, 14, or in the case of Hard Day's Night, 13 was the standard. The reason for fewer tracks, financial, all to do with copyright laws in America, where Capitol would have to pay a copyright fee per track that was on the album, whereas in the UK you just paid a flat fee just for the album. Didn't matter how many tracks were on it, it was the same fee regardless. So Capitol could save a few cents per copy by putting less tracks on the album, and if you're selling 3 or 4 million of the things, then that is gonna add up. So what we end up with is completely different sequencing, less tracks. Some would call it butchering. I don't want to call it butchering, because I think that is too crude a term, because when you actually read about the reasons what songs went on each album, there's a lot of thought that has gone into the track sequencing. Dave Dexter, who put these albums together, he was in charge of foreign acts at Capitol, so it was his job to come up with the sequencing. And one of the things that he believed in was that if you want to sell an album, then you've got to have a hit single on it. So he put a hit single on it, and consequently these albums became a little bit like compilation albums, even though they were like official releases in the US and other places around the world. They were a little bit like compilations, because there's a track from this album, there's a track from that album, there's an A side here and a B side there. You're taking different songs out of context from different sources. But back in the 60s, albums weren't, at this early stage in the 60s, albums weren't really considered to be a work of art like they were by the time we got to the mid 60s. And I know that Capitol didn't put out Revolver as it was supposed to be, but Revolver is probably the first Beatles album that has got a proper opening track, a proper ending track, and everything else needs to be where it is on the album. I think even when you got Rubber Soul, it's still a bunch of songs, and that's what all these albums that preceded were. They were just they were a bunch of songs, so they lend themselves a little bit more to being resequenced in various orders. Now, Dave Dexter also knew he knew the American market. He knew how how the American audiences wanted to hear these records, and he knew how to make them sound good on AM radio, and that is the reason why he added reverb and stuff like that. But from what I can understand is that there's 2 types of record or mixes here. There are true mono mixes on these albums, and there are stereo fold down mixes as well. So and the reverb was really added to the stereo fold downs, not to the true mono mixes. There are 2 true mono mixes on the first album, Meet the Beatles, and that is the A and the B side of the I Want to Hold Your Hand single. So that one and This Boy are true mono. All the rest are fold down mixes. Now, what he also had to do was because all the kids, no one had stereo equipment. All the kids were had little record players in their bedrooms or whatever, very unsophisticated gear, and if you had too much bass on it, the needle would jump, and that isn't any different in the UK. The UK had the same issue, so the bass was dialed down so it wasn't too bassy, wasn't too throbby, didn't vibrate too much and make the needle jump. And I think that they also took some of the top end off as well, for the point of radio and stuff. So when you hear these records, now these records have not been remixed, but I think that they have reverted back to their original state before the dialing down. So the bass is really, it's quite full on all of these records. Sounds really, really good. Sometimes a little bit too much. Some people might find the bass a little bit too much. Personally, I quite like it. I think, it sounds really good. Ringo's cymbals and hi-hat seem, that top end is not missing anymore. They're coming through loud and clear. But one thing that I can say generally about all of these albums, and you'll notice it as soon as you put one of them on, they are cut so loud. They are really, really loud. And that isn't particularly a bad thing, because that it makes them exciting. They sound really exciting, and they sound really ballsy. And the fact that you've got the bass throbbing as well, and the swishing of Ringo's drumstick on hi-hat, all comes through clear. It makes it really exciting and very full on and in your face. And I'm kind of used to that. Because I grew up in the sort of, the punk era in the UK, and punk records were like that. They were, very full on. They didn't have great dynamics and stuff, between highs and lows and light and shade. And, they were in your face. So I'm kind of used to it. And that is what this sounded like to me. It sounded like a more tuneful sort of punk record, and very, very exciting and very, very enjoyable. Now, one thing that Dave Dexter thought when he put this sequencing together was that American audiences wouldn't want to hear a British band singing or playing and singing American songs by American artists. So there is only one cover version on this album, Till There Was You. All the rest are all Lennon McCartney originals, which is quite impressive for a first for a first album. So another thing that you need to remember about these albums is when these these master tapes arrived at Capitol, they weren't the original master tapes. They would have been a copy, because Parlophone are not gonna they're not gonna send out their original. That's not going out the door. They would make a copy of it and send that out. So the tapes that Dave Dexter received would have been second generation tapes. So there will be a bit of degradation in the sound on that. So if you're looking for these albums to be the best sounding mono versions of these songs, then you're probably going to be a little bit disappointed. Now, I'm not, I should sort of say, I'm not a massive fan of mono anyway. I was brought up on the stereos, and I know about all the panning. That's a problem with the stereos, but the mono's a very narrow sound with not huge dynamics at all. And so if you are looking for the best sounding, this isn't it. I did compare a few songs against my UK mono albums out of the Beatles in mono box set that I've got, and they don't sound as good as those. But as I say, they are really exciting. They've definitely got more bass than the UK ones, and they've got more top end than the UK ones, and they're certainly louder as well. But they're not as good sonically as those. They're probably better than the original Capitol albums. I don't have those, so I can't compare those, but from what I've read, these sound a lot better than the original albums, the Capitol albums from the 60s. The actual track listing, kicks off with the single, the hit single, I Want to Hold Your Hand, and straight out of the gate we are off. That it absolutely rocks, as does the next track, I Saw Her Standing There, from Please Please Me. If you can get it out of your head that the 1 2 3 4 counting is not at the beginning of the album, it is track 2, you're away, because it really does rock, and the bass is just fantastic in this song. You can really hear what Paul is playing. It sounds fantastic. Beautiful harmonies and stuff on this boy, as you would expect. All the rest of the tracks come from With the Beatles. I thought Don't Bother Me as the opening track on side 2 breathed new life into it. I thought it was great. It sounded great in that position. But all in all, I say, it is really loud. The album is really loud, and when you listen to one album after the other, and 2 times in my case, straight through, it can grate. It can begin to grate and give you a bit of fatigue in the ears. So be aware of that. But they, with Meet the Beatles, very, very exciting and very, very enjoyable. So of course, Capitol, turned down the first 4 Beatles singles and the album Please Please Me, but that has kind of gone out the window. They've forgotten completely, or they're in complete denial that VJ put out the Introducing the Beatles album before Meet the Beatles, and we'll come to that a little bit later when we discuss the early Beatles. But then the factually incorrectly titled the Beatles' second album, because of course this is their third album, but their second Capitol album is next up. And this one, this is the tracks that are left over from With the Beatles, mostly covers on here. We've got, it opens up with Roll Over Beethoven, which sounds fantastic. Then we've got an original track, Thank You Girl, the B-side of From Me to You, a revelation for me, because it's got extra harmonica in it, the call and response bit in the verse, and the bit at the end, the build up at the end, that bit has got harmonica in it. Never heard that before. Revelation, loved it, loved that. All these tracks sound really good. Long Tall Sally sounds phenomenal. So does I Call Your Name. I Get You and She Loves You. All really good. A lot of my American friends have said this is probably the favourite of the Capitol albums. It's not for me. Too many covers on it for me, but I did really love Thank You Girl. With that extra harmonica, that was a revelation. On this album, we've got You Can't Do That. It's the first track from A Hard Day's Night, or more accurately, the B-side of Can't Buy Me Love is on here. That is a true mono mix, as are the 2 tracks from the Long Tall Sally EP and I'll Get You and She Loves You. Again, enjoyable, very, very loud, but very enjoyable. The Beatles' second album, like that one. Not as much as Meet the Beatles, but I liked it. So next up is the Hard Day's Night soundtrack. Now this, for me, was the most disappointing album out of the 6. I don't think it sounds that great, which is a real shame, because it's got some really good songs on it, but it doesn't sound that great. Now this album every track on this album is a true mono mix, and Bruce Spicer, in his notes, he says that when Dave Dexter is compiling an album, which he's not compiling this one, when he's compiling it, he's only putting reverb on the tracks that are stereo fold downs into mono. He's not putting them on the true mono mixes. But I think that whoever is compiling this album at United Artists is putting reverb on these tracks, even though they're true mono, because Hard Day's Night, which may have needed reverb, for radio play because it was a single, it just does not sound good at all. It's not a great sounding track, that, and neither is Tell Me Why, for different reasons. Tell Me Why has always been a little bit toppy, and it's really toppy here because and being very toppy, and like all the other albums in this set being cut really loud is is a bad combination, I think. So it becomes quite shrill, I think. However, I'll Cry Instead, which is the next track, is really good. Sounds really good. Fabulous bass in that. Ringo's kick drum throughout it. All audible. Really good track. I'll Cry Instead, an underrated track, and it sounds good here. But of course, this album is the one that has got 4 instrumental tracks from the incidental music from the film, played by George Martin Orchestra, and I'm glad to have these. I've never owned them before, and but they're about as inconsequential as the second side of Yellow Submarine. The first one that comes up, track 4, is a kind of a jazz workout of I Should Have Known Better, with saxes going off everywhere and guitar solos, and there's a sax solo in it that has got really no resemblance to anything that is in the song I Should Have Known Better. It's jazz, nice. But the other instrumentals, and I Love Her, I really liked that. I thought that was really nice. I also liked the Ringo's theme, which is this boy. Didn't really care much for A Hard Day's Night instrumental, and as I say, I'm glad to have these now, but I can't. Will I return to these? I can't imagine myself saying, I'm going to play the Hard Day's Night soundtrack just to hear those instrumentals from the film. It's something that I'm never going to say. So I'm probably not going to come back to this album too often. All the songs. I think all the songs from the film are here. All the other tracks sound okay, but it's not a great sounding album. So this was, a bit of a disappointment for me. That's the Hard Day's Night soundtrack. So I don't know who the bloke was at Capitol whose main job was for coming up with the titles of these albums, but he should have been fired after coming up with the title the Beatles' second album, which is really unimaginative, and as we've already discussed, also not true because it was their third album. But by the time Something New came along, he definitely should have gone another terrible title, but technically he's right, because there is something new on this album, but there are also 5 tracks that have already appeared on the Hard Day's Night soundtrack. I'll Cry Instead, Tell Me Why, and I Love Her, I'm Happy Just to Dance With You, and If I Fell, all on this album, also on the Hard Day's Night soundtrack. So American fans getting these tracks for a second time. Compensation is that they sound much better on this album than they do on the Hard Day's Night soundtrack, and that, I guess, we must put down to the Dave Dexter effect. All the tracks on this album are all true mono mixes. We also get some selections from side 2 of the UK Hard Day's Night album, I'll Cry Instead, which opens up side 1, Things We Said Today, Anytime At All, When I Get Home. We also get the 2 remaining tracks from the Long Tall Sally EP, which both sound really, really good, really powerful, great rock and roll songs, sound really good here. The album finishes with the German language I Want to Hold Your Hand, which came out on Something New in America in 1964. We didn't get it in the UK until this album came out, The Beatles' Rarities, in 1980. So we didn't have it all our own way in the UK. So Something New I thought was a good sounding album. I did really enjoy it. So I like this one quite a lot. Nice one. So the next album, Beatles 65, which of course came out in 1964, but we won't dwell on that. Do really like the cover of this album, with the Beatles in these 4 pictures, representing the 4 seasons. Not the band, the 4 seasons, not Frankie Valli and the 4 seasons. That would be ridiculous. The 4 seasons of the year. And just to sort of ram the point home, if you didn't get it, you've got Ringo and Paul holding springs in that photo to let you know that picture represents the season of spring. Now, this I think is the best sounding album in the set. All true mono mixes on this one as well. Side 1 is exactly the same as Beatles for Sale, the UK Beatles for Sale, tracks 1 to 6. The only track that's missing from side 1 is Kansas City on here. All of them sound good, apart from Rock and Roll Music, which again suffers from that combination that I talked about earlier, being very toppy, and of course, the whole album is cut really loud, which is a recipe for disaster. It's not quite a disaster, but it doesn't sound as good as the other tracks on that side. What does sound really good is the opener on side 2, Honey Don't. I thought was fantastic. Sounded really good. Ringo singing it great. George's guitar solo. Everything sounds really, really nice on that track. And then we get sort of 3 curios on this album. The first one, I'll Be Back. Now, this is a different mix to the mix that we had on the UK Hard Day's Night. This is the remaining track from Hard Day's Night that hasn't been out on an American album, the last track on the UK album. I say, different mix done by George Martin, who put reverb on it and sent it over, and Bruce Spicer says that it is a slower tempo than the UK version, but I timed both of them, and there was 1 second difference between the two, and that could have been, when I started the stopwatch on my phone, but they both clocked in around 2 minutes 19, so it couldn't have been that much slower if there's only like a second difference between the two. So I'm not sure about that, but that is a curious, a different mix on this album. Then She's a Woman and I Feel Fine, the latest Beatles single at the time that this album came out, again reverb put on by George Martin on both these tracks. Now, I really like She's a Woman with reverb on it. I think it sounds great. It sounds more, because She's a Woman has always been a little bit tinny. The chinky guitar, it just sounds more fuller. The bass is there. I really like this version of She's a Woman, and it's nice to hear that song in a different way. Unfortunately, I Feel Fine is a mess. It really is a mess. It doesn't sound good at all. It's far too reverby. I do not like it at all, unfortunately. The final track, Everybody's Trying to Be My Baby, sung by George, is a good album closer. So that is Beatles 65. As I say, I think this on the whole is the best sounding album of the set. So the last album in the set that we're going to discuss is this one, the Early Beatles, as you probably know. This is Capitol's version of the VJ album, introducing the Beatles, which is officially the first Beatles album in America. And this album came out in March 1965. So, it's a bit puzzling as to why this has been included in this 1964 box. There doesn't seem to be any reason at all. The tracks are old, but they were recorded in 1963. Maybe someone at Capitol did the maths and said, well, the songs were recorded in 1963. We're putting it out in 1965. The average of that is 1964. Stick it in the box. Maybe that's the reason. But this album is a really good sounding album. Liked this a lot. There are only two true mono mixes on this, Love Me Do and P.S. I Love You. It's the Love Me Do version with Andy White on drums, Ringo on tambourine. Ringo playing very loud tambourine. But this album does sound really good. It is the Please Please Me album. There are 3 tracks missing. I Saw Her Standing There, which we've already discussed, is on Meet the Beatles. Tracks that are missing from this, There's a Place and Misery. And I believe that they didn't appear on Capitol until this album in 1980. The Beatles' Rarities, so long wait for those tracks. But I say this album does sound really good. The stars of the show are mostly on side 1. Twist and Shout sounds great. So does Anna and Chains. And Boys just blew me away. It was just fantastic. It's just so powerful. It's so raucous. Really, really good. Ringo singing fantastic on it. Brilliant bass on it. Really, really good. Really, really good track. Obviously, Please Please Me is probably the best track technically on this album. But very, very good. I really enjoyed this album, and thumbs up for the Early Beatles. So that is everything that was in the box, apart from the Beatles story, which I haven't spoken about. But overall, there are a few tracks that are a little bit hit and miss, but on the whole, these are great sounding records. As a Brit, hearing these for the first time, I've really enjoyed going through these albums and hearing these albums for the first time, and I will certainly come back to them. These records have had a bad rap in the past. Maybe with this issue, that will be a thing of the past, and they'll get a little bit more respect because they are so important. They're so important to Beatles history that they've always deserved something better. So very pleased that they have got that. Now, if you've got this set or you've got any of the individual records, please tell me what you think of them down in the comments. Love to hear from you. I will read all your comments. I love to read all your comments, and I will respond to all your comments. So that is pretty much it from me. Thanks very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I will see you all very soon. Bye bye.